For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Advocate Paul Hoffman discusses his latest book titled Confronting the Corrupt, Accountability Now's Battle Against Graft in SA. Your book brings sharp and critical focus to the arms deal scandal that has haunted our country for many years. In a nutshell, what do you think were the main reasons of corruption linked to the arms deal?
Well, there was more than corruption. There was a lot of other irregularity as well. But I think the difficulty around corruption was that very sophisticated European arms dealers came into South Africa and persuaded a very inexperienced new government that it would be very clever to spend a lot of money on a lot of armaments to fight a lot of enemies we don't have by using money we had to borrow to do so. I really do think that a lot of the blame must be placed at the doors of the armaments industry in Europe. They are the ones who put the South African government up to these acquisitions.
After our President Jacob Zuma announced in 2011 a commission to investigate the arms deal, you wrote a letter to Vasoni bringing him up to speed about the complexity of the case. What was your main aim of writing such a letter?
Well, Vasoni had been appointed as the evidence leader for the commission. So it was his job to gather the information that we had been working on for a very long time. So I was being collegial. I was giving him a heads up, if you like, about what we had found out along the way and where he could look in order to make the commission efficient and effective and get to the nub of the matter quickly. As it happened, Vasoni had a conflict of interest and he didn't participate at all. But the letter did feature in the deliberations of the evidence leaders. And in fact, I was subpoenaed to come and reveal my source in relation to some of the information that I put in the letter. And I was very happy to do that.
Did you ever have faith that the Arms Deal Commission would do a good job in uncovering the corruption associated with the arms deal? And what is your assessment of the Commission's ultimate findings?
Yes, I'm afraid that while we started with high hopes, in the end it is now clear, I think, to any objective observer that the Seriti Commission was a continuation of the executive cover-up of the malfeasance and misfeasance in the arms deals that started even before they signed up, let alone continued right through the first decade of this century.
The Commission's findings must have been a slap in the face, especially for the whistleblower Patricia de Lille. What did you make of it?
Yes, well, as I say, I think you're right. That is a good description of what went on. But it's not all doom and gloom. We spent a lot of taxpayers' money on the inquiry, and enough came out in that inquiry to enable us to prepare particulars of claim. And we've decided at this point that rather than try to eat the whole elephant in one sitting, we are taking it one bite at a time. The biggest of the four deals is the deal with British Aerospace in relation to the jets that were bought, many of which have never really been used at all. We're on the point of issuing summons for the cancellation or invalidation of the deal between the South African government, Arms Corps, and British Aerospace. And we've got three causes of action there. The first one is that the procurement criteria of our constitution were not observed in the process of buying the jets, and that means the deal's invalid. The second is that Trevor Manuel, who was then the Minister of Finance, did not have the power to borrow money overseas, and that has the effect of also invalidating the deal. And of course, everybody's favorite, the third one, is the question of corruption tainting the transaction. And as you know, with corruption, fraud unravels everything, and that would lead to the cancellation of the deal and also to the payment of 5% of the deal's value has pre-estimated damages to the South African people. So it's really the object of the exercise is to get the unused aircraft returned to British Aerospace and the money returned to the South African taxpayer so that we can use it to deal with problems like fees must fall and esidimeni and all of the failures to deliver on the promises of the Bill of Rights.
You also had an interesting, if I may say, meeting with Mr. Glenister, who was, in your words, horrified by the fact that the Scorpions were going to be dissolved. Can you share what transpired in that meeting?
Yes, that meeting actually happened before we started Accountability Now, which is the NGO whose story about corruption is told in the book. Mr. Glenister is a Johannesburg businessman who, I think like a lot of people, was very concerned when he read or heard that the ANC had resolved at its Polokwane conference, which was December 2007, quite a long time ago now, 10 years ago in fact. The resolution that was made there was that the Scorpions needed to be dissolved urgently, that the investigators in the Scorpions needed to be transferred to the police, and the object of the exercise was really to get this effective, efficient corruption-busting unit off the backs of ANC politicians and their friends and family in business. And that has effectively happened. With great difficulty, the Jackie Salebi prosecution did proceed on the basis of a Scorpions investigation. John Block has also been brought to justice as a result of that, and of course Shabir Sheikh was sentenced to 15 years for corrupting a gentleman, a private citizen called Jacob G. Zuma. So the Scorpions were able to go after the big fish. The Hawks have never gone after any big fish. In fact, at the moment, the Hawks seem to be more involved in political intrigue and the sort of dirty work department of a particular faction in the ANC at the moment. It's not working properly, and all one has to do is read the reports or watch the activities of Robert McBride, who has the job of trying to keep he polices the police, and the Hawks are policemen, which is part of the problem. See, our experience in that Glenister case, coming all the way back to your question, Mr. Glenister wanted to do something about the disbandment of the Scorpions. He started a thing called the Save the Scorpions campaign. He got more than 100,000 people to sign a petition, which in South Africa is very unusual. And he litigated 3 times. On 3 separate occasions, he appeared in the Constitutional Court as an applicant, always with the aim of preserving the effectiveness, efficiency and independence of the anti-corruption machinery of state in South Africa. And he still hasn't got it right. We can see today that the Hawks are not imbued with the characteristics that the court has laid down. The court has said, the Constitutional Court, and it is the highest court in the land, and what it says is binding on the government. It has said, if you are going to have constitutionally compliant machinery of state to deal with corruption, it has to satisfy 5 criteria. Specialization, so it's dedicated to dealing with corruption. Training, which means that you make sure that your operatives are smarter than the corrupt people, which is quite a big ask. Independence, which is the thing that is really lacking with the Hawks. Independence means the ability to act without fear, favor, or prejudice, without political influence, without political interference. The 4th characteristic is resources, and resources must be guaranteed. You cannot have a situation where the taps are turned off, the oxygen tube is stood upon, or there's no fuel in the tank. Sufficient resources must be voted to the anti-corruption entity in order to see to it that it can do the work that is required. And the last characteristic, which is the one that the Scorpions didn't have, is that the personnel in that anti-corruption entity have to enjoy security of tenure of office. If they don't have security of tenure of office, then they're going to, if they start going after the big cheeses, they're going to have the same fate as the Scorpions. And there's actually an illustration of it. You know, the Constitutional Court in the last hearing, which was as long ago as November 2014, said the remedial legislation is not good enough, but we are going to edit it, correct it, with a view to making the Scorpion, the Hawks, similar to what the Scorpions were. And immediately the additional powers were given to the Hawks. The general in charge of the Hawks, a man called Anwar Dramot, wrote to head office at the police and said, "Those Nkandla dockets that you have been keeping away from me, may I please have them?" Remember, the judgment was November. Before Christmas, 23rd of December, he was suspended, and a couple of months later, after a lot of pressure and a lot of unhappiness in his family, he actually resigned and took a package. Now, that ought not to happen in a properly functioning, independent anti-corruption entity. So what we are doing now is we are promoting the idea of an integrity commission as a new Chapter 9 institution. That's Thuli Madonsela with a supercharge, because the public protector only deals with affairs of state and the public administration. No jurisdiction over the private sector, and we tend to forget it, but the truth is that there is a lot of corruption in the private sector too, and a lot of the corruption in procurement involves both the public sector and the private sector. So because the public protector is only dealing with maladministration in public affairs and not in the private sector, an integrity commission could be parked in Chapter 9 of the Constitution between the Auditor General and the Public Protector, with a mandate to prevent, combat, investigate, and prosecute corruption wherever it is found, at whatever level, protected by the 5 criteria that the court has laid down. That's not actually happening, and either Parliament must pass remedial legislation in order to upgrade the Hawks, or Mr. Glenister will have to go back to court for the 4th time, which is a world record. I mean, he's already holds the world record because nobody else has been back to that court on 3 occasions. And if he has to go a 4th time, his case will be, "Well, thank you for what you did last time, but it hasn't worked. The Hawks are not doing what they should be doing." Their productivity is about 1/3 of what it was when they started. And when they started, their productivity was lower than the Scorpions. So we really are in danger of disappearing under a tide of corruption in this country. And that's why I get up early in the morning in order to come to you and to spread the word of the Integrity Commission, because it is possible, with enough public support, with the creation of the necessary political will, it is possible to bring about the reform that is needed to get on top of corruption and to put South Africa on the high road to the future.
Your book also highlights the bread cartel case involving the 3 bread producers, Pioneer Foods, Tiger Consumer Brands, as well as Premier Foods. How serious is cartel issues in our country?
Well, your question is very timely, and it ties in with what I just said about the amount of corruption in the private sector. They colluded to push up the price of bread and to push down the amount of the commissions that they had to pay to the people who distributed bread for them, and they agreed among themselves that they wouldn't poach each other's distributors. So that is a fraudulent arrangement to make money in a way that is not competitive. And they got closed down, but the big thing that came out of that case, the biggest contribution that Accountability Now has made to the jurisprudence of South Africa, is that we were representing the distributors, and we got the Constitutional Court to endorse the idea of a general class action in South African law. That was never there before, and now that it is there, it means that consumers, people whose Ford Cougars explode, people who get cheated on the amount of bread that they bought, are able to band together in a class and sue in one action.
Can you also tell us more about your organization, Accountability Now's battle against graft in our country? What kind of cases do you deal with?
We like to think that we are involved in what we call lawfare. Now, lawfare is not a word that you will find in the dictionary, because it's a made-up word. We are using the law to wage war for the welfare of the people. So we're taking law, war, and welfare and pushing it into one word. And technically it's called public interest litigation. And public interest litigation, or test cases, is what we have specialized in. We think that without accountability we are not going to have a happy future, and we seek to promote responsiveness to the needs of ordinary people. And we do it through the media. We do it by making educational input, commentary in the media. We've written a handbook on the Constitution, which anybody can download for free off our website, accountabilitynow.org.za. And that handbook on the Constitution is like a primer or a manual for the citizen to A, understand the Constitution, and B, be advised as to what you can do when you are not happy about some situation in which you find yourself. Maybe a human rights threat that is worrying you, maybe a municipality that's not filling the potholes or mowing the sidewalks. All of those sorts of things can be followed up on in our new constitutional dispensation on a basis that costs you nothing. And if you are scared to do it because you don't want to be victimized as a whistleblower, then a complaint can be done anonymously and has to be followed up on. So there's really no excuse for South Africans to pretend to be living in an authoritarian regime where they are passive subjects. We all need to become active citizens, and that little handbook, Know Your Rights, Claim Your Rights, is a means to empower ordinary people to use what the Constitution gives them. And that, foundationally speaking, is aimed at respecting human dignity, promoting the achievement of equality, and enjoying the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed to us in our Bill of Rights, which is Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is 20 years old this month in terms of being in operation. We haven't in South Africa done enough as a country, but as individuals as well, to acquaint ourselves with the power of the Constitution and with its relevance to the issues in our daily lives. And if we can get that right through the schools, through the media, we stand a better chance of being a peaceful, prosperous, and progressive country than if we all just sit back and expect the government to do it for us, when we all know that the government does not have the capacity to do it for us if we don't prod it in the right direction.
Can you also tell us about Accountability Now's role in the Nkandla case?
Yes, that we weren't involved in the litigation itself, and we were very impressed with the Chief Justice's judgment on the merits of the case. Remember that Nkandla case was the case in which it was definitively decided that the public protector has powers that are binding and enforceable. So when she says this is the remedial action that must be taken, it means must be taken, not a recommendation, take it or leave it if you don't like it. That part of the judgment is great. The problem with the judgment that we have picked up, and not only us who've picked it up, other people have too, is that President Zuma was ordered to pay back 7.8 million rand. The contract cost, it is estimated, 246 million rand. Now, you are going to search in vain to find enhancements of a security nature to the value of the difference between the 7.8 and the 246. And that wrinkle in the judgment, that error, is one which we regard as an innocent error made by the court that needs to be fixed. There is provision in the law for it, and I think that we have persuaded one of the applicants in the case to actually go back to court and say, excuse me, judges, you've said the remedial action is binding and enforceable. The remedial action is not aimed at the big five, the fire pool, the amphitheatre, the cattle kraal, the chicken run, and the visitor centre. It's aimed at all of the expenditure that cannot properly be called security enhancements. The president is entitled to make his house secure at the expense of the taxpayer. He's not entitled to make it luxurious at the expense of the taxpayer. And on any proper reading of the Secure in Comfort report of the public protector, she wasn't talking about just the big five or the little five. She was talking about all of the non-security enhancements. And President Zuma owes the taxpayer a lot more than the 7.8 million he's been ordered to pay.
Do you think that the South African and other African governments are doing enough to fight corruption?
No, not at all. There is a sense of impunity abroad. Elites seem to think they can have their turn to eat. That's a phrase that comes out of Nairobi. And our turn to eat is the theme of many liberation movements who have led their countries to ruin because they think that coming into power is an opportunity for self-enrichment, not an opportunity for service to the people. People who want to get rich must go into business. People who want to serve others must go into politics. But going into politics to get rich is a no-no. It's a complete conflict of interests, and it undermines good governance, the rule of law, accountability, and responsiveness to the needs of ordinary people. So what we have in Africa is far too much of the impunity, the ability to just get away with it. And corruption is stealing from the poor, and it is undermining trust in government. And when you undermine trust in government, you are then starting with the undermining of the state as such. You're starting to take that slippery slide to failed state status. At the moment, South Africa is sitting one notch above junk status. When we get to junk status, we won't be able to borrow the money we need to pay the social welfare grants to 17 million people. I think we spend about 10 billion rand a month on social grants in this country. If we cannot keep going on that, half of the people in the country are going to suffer in some way or other because they live in what Moletsi Mbeki calls the underclass, for just over 49% of the population, is either unemployed, unemployable, or underemployed. That half of the population will not sit back calmly and say, oh well, we're not getting our social grant this month, let's do something else. They will become exceedingly angry about it, and they will take it out. The have-nots will take it out on the haves, and a Zimbabwe-like situation is beckoning. So the importance of establishing an integrity commission, of reversing the tide of corruption. Well, let me use the Chief Justice's phrase, because it's a very nice one. He says we've got to prevent it from graduating into something terminal. And he's right. A failed state is not one in which people's investments are protected and are growing. It's not one in which pensions are paid. It's one where chaos and misery, rather than peace and prosperity, are the order of the day.
Thank you very much, Advocate, for your time. That was Advocate Paul Hoffman speaking to Crima Media's Polity about his latest book titled Confronting the Corrupt, Accountability Now's Battle Against Graft in SA.